Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Proper Madness. My name is Sabby, and I give a unique perspective on mental health by providing tools, guidance, and knowledge on how we can better understand ourselves, as well as our past and present experiences, and in doing so, we can help heal our mental health. I get to speak with a variety of individuals from around the world as they share their stories from their journey through their mental wellness so that it helps others stand strong and use their voice. Welcome back, everyone, to Proper Madness. Today, I'm honored by a new guest, a new face. His name is John Templeton. I found him on Instagram as I was scrolling, and he had such a prolific post that he posted on dating and relationships that it struck my interest, and I had to have him on. So I'll let him introduce you to himself and what he's about.
First off, Sabby, thank you so much. I've known you for probably less than 24 hours. For anyone listening, this is the first time we've actually interacted apart from a couple of messages on Instagram. So yeah, I'm John Templeton. I'm a bit of a high achiever. I'm a Guinness World Record Holder, ex-Special Forces trainer, lots of other things. And I'm now a master coach and a healer. I run events and retreats and programs around, different places around the world. Got a retreat in Bali next month, which is exciting. And I really focus on enriching people's lives and empowering people's lives. And that comes in many forms, like Sabby said, through the relationships. They're a huge part of what brings fulfillment and what brings pain, to someone's life, as well as empowerment in their career, their self-belief, their confidence, living a life of purpose and meaning. So that's what I'm on this earth for. It's what I love doing. And that's why I'm here today as well with Sabby.
Tell me a little bit about your background. What made you go from special forces training to doing what you do now? What inspired that transition?
In the military, the military saved my life. I'll just put that out there. I spent 7 years in the Army, finished my career as a physical training instructor for the Special Forces. And in the military, you're limited by other people. It's a hierarchical structure. It's same with most careers. And I started to empower myself, personal development, personal growth, and I realized that I knew more than the people that were in charge of me. I knew I could lead better. I didn't want to wait for a space to open up or have to attend courses to be able to forward my career, my income, and, the quality of my life. So I decided to leave the military and I started up my own personal training company. And then I built 2 gyms and ended up selling those 2 gyms. And just through leading in the military, coaching, being an athlete myself, and then coaching athletes through the gyms, I realized that it was mindset that really made the difference in someone's ability as an athlete, but also in someone's life. And so I trained a number of athletes, including Olympic athletes. And I got to the point where I was like, I just want to help more and more people, not just the high achievers, but also the people that are experiencing disempowerment in their life, their relationships. And so I'm a bit of a geek. I want to know how the world works. I want to know how relationships work. I want to know, because I want to have optimal health, right? I want an optimal relationship. I want to have wealth. I want to have all those things, but not at the cost of fulfillment. And so I explored, what does that look like and what does that take? And I've dedicated my life to that. And naturally, when you learn something, you want to teach and help others, and we all want to contribute back to society. So I guess with all of those threads, it kind of led me to being a coach and not specializing, because I truly believe that life is a holistic endeavor, and being the best generalist that the earth has ever seen. Like, that's the goal, is to be a generalist that can support people, from the high income earning CEOs and the Olympic athletes, all the way down to someone who's really struggling in their relationship, or they're playing out patterns of disempowerment. I want the skill set to support everybody. And that's why I run events, so that people can come and have that experience that transforms their lives.
That's beautiful. I like that. That's really, really cool. Because everyone has their own meanings and purpose within what they do and how they find out what they want to do. And I think that's really cool. Like, as much of the relationship patterns that you're currently seeing in most of the I know everyone's relationships are different. Every situation is different. But what is the most common thing that you see generally with people and their relationships and how they get stuck?
Well, being a man, I obviously know It's like I'm far from perfect. I've got my own patterns that play out, and I'm very aware of them. And with each relationship that I move into, even if it's a short one, I'll notice patterns within myself that are essentially disempowering, which means taking me away from being loving and being an expression of love. And so I see those, but obviously I'm also experiencing firsthand the female patterns that play out as well. And the one I posted about is the one that's most sort of dear to me, because I have clients, many clients that are going through this now, and that is when a woman, and it's so rampant on earth for reasons we can talk about, that has really had to step into the masculine role. So a woman, a female that has had to step into the masculine role because she didn't feel safe maybe at home or, growing up, or she's had to go out on her own in the workforce. And the workforce is a very masculine driven, modern society. And these women can lose touch with their feminine essence and their femininity. And that just throws out the whole polarity for all of their relationships, because then they're attracting either super masculine men, which are going to end up hurting them in some way because they're just so dominant, or they're going to attract more feminine and soft men, which they lack that strength and dominance. And so the woman doesn't feel safe. So there's these two sort of, they oscillate between both. They try going for the, bad boy. They try going for that dominant guy, and they get hurt, right? They don't feel emotionally nurtured. And so they go, fuck, I don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
I want to go to someone who's going to emotionally nurture me. And then they go and they find a feminine guy, and the feminine guy might emotionally nurture them, but almost too much. And he lacks the strength, the direction in life, the purpose that leads a woman. And so they oscillate between this dynamic, and really everything is a reflection of us. And until they really soften back into their feminine essence, it's just going to continue and continue. And most women just give up. They're like, well, it doesn't work, right? And they quit, and they're like, relationship's not for me. And then 6 months later, they're feeling lonely, and then they go back in, and it just turns into a cluster of pain and repeating patterns.
Yeah, I can definitely speak from experience. So much of my listeners know my experiences with dating. I definitely have the wounded masculine due to like PTSD and depression. So it's like a defense mechanism where this wall goes up and you're going, I don't know if I'm safe with this person. So you step into your masculine like you want to control the situation with the other person, and then it goes so many ways. But I've noticed previously, definitely not currently, but previously I did go for more like the bad boys, but underneath they were in their feminine energy. And I was always taking charge. I was always, almost leading the dynamic, and that can get exhausting. In your perspective, we can do both topics. Why a male would be more in their feminine as opposed to masculine, and why you think that happens. I know right now the world's kind of, the way the world is currently, I'm not shocked that there's more men in their feminine as opposed to their masculine. So
yeah. So any pattern is just a strategy that we utilize in order to get what we want. And so we might want to feel safe. We might want to feel validated. We might want to feel some kind of stimulation or excitement in life. We might want to feel like closeness and connection with someone. And so we see other people and we watch them, and we're like, oh, that pattern, the way they're being, it looks like that's getting them connection, and if you really want connection with someone, you might imitate that pattern. And also, like we've talked about, it's like you experience enough pain with a bad boy, you're going to be like, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
So what's the opposite? You're like, because the mind only works in opposites, essentially in duality, we only know good because bad exists. So if we say that is bad, the bad boy is unhealthy, we're going to go, well, what's the opposite? Oh, like the good boy, the nice guy. And then you're going to go and walk all over him. And so the reason we play any pattern is past experiences. Past experiences, we learn, well, that led to pain, I'm going to do the opposite. Or that led to pleasure, I'm going to keep doing that. So all patterns of behavior, they're just strategies that we use to experience, to move away from pain and to move towards pleasure. But the problem is we always go in opposite directions instead of healing the wound, integrating the aspect of us that's essentially, to break it down deeper.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a specific example. And if a woman doesn't feel safe in a relationship, right? Like you said, there is that feminine aspect that is vulnerable. That's a feminine quality and trait, is going to close off.
Yeah.
So now you've suppressed and repressed a part of yourself. So you're not being whole, you're being just a part. Now, because you lack, or you shut down that vulnerability because you don't feel safe by being vulnerable, all of a sudden that aspect of you is offline. And so you're going to play out patterns which are the opposite to vulnerable. And you said it, like you put a wall up, you get defensive. Yeah. So because vulnerability leads to pain, you say no. And because defensiveness leads to your safety, which is a form of pleasure, you say yes. And so now that pattern's locked in.
Yeah.
And it's not until that is remedied, the perception you have of vulnerability, until that is rebalanced, which is bringing you into a state of equilibrium, until that happens, the same dynamics will play out. So, you asked, where do these patterns come from? They come from us avoiding pain from the past. Whenever we want to avoid pain, we build belief systems around what's good or bad, what's right or wrong, what you should or shouldn't do, and that leads to all of your future patterns.
I like the way that you explain that. That was a good way to explain that, because it makes sense, right? Because the beliefs that we have dictate the actions we take at that point, and how we act and how we don't act. So I like the way you explain that. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize the more you avoid the pain that you've been through, and the less you heal what you've been through, the more you're going to still keep attracting the wrong type of people, or keep going for the wrong types of partners, right? Either too much in their feminine or too much in their masculine, whichever one.
Or just give up. I see a lot of women be like, I'm done with dating. And it's like, no. Just look inside. Where are you? Take responsibility for this. How's the dynamic playing out? Because it's really a science. It's a science. It's someone said to me the other day, how can you be so sure that this is the same for everyone? And that's because it's literally a science. If you get a magnet and it's got a positive, if you get two magnets and you put the positive and negative together, they go together. That is polarity. And the same with a car battery. It's got a positive and a negative, and you need both to create the circuit. The same thing happens with relationships. The man is the positive, the woman is the negative, and opposites attract. We've heard this. It's very true. But if you're in your masculine and they're a man and they're masculine, you're going to conflict and clash. That is why if you go for the bad boy and you lack vulnerability in that feminine essence, you're going to clash. There's going to be conflict all the time, because you're both going to be using masculinity to try and feel safe or to get your needs met.
Yeah.
And so that's why the two patterns, they're the only two possible patterns that play out. You either go with a bad boy and clash, or you find a man who's in his negative pole, because you're in the positive, you're in the masculine, he's in the feminine, and you're drawn together. It's just not going to feel right. Like you said, you're not built to lead.
No.
You're built to be led. And with everything going on in the world, you were saying, men and women are best together. We are best together. We without each other, we're two halves, and it's not potent, it's not powerful. When there's a really strong man in your life, I can guarantee you that there's more energy to put into your life vision, your mission and your purpose. And same for a man. When there's a woman that comes in and supports, it's like there's so much potency. But in the world today, there's all this going both ways, but there's all this feminine empowerment, and it's there for a reason, because there have been very unhealthy relationships and dominant men and women getting hurt. But what it's doing is it's over masculinizing woman. That's it's killing relationships off. So it goes on both sides. As men, we need to lean more into our feminine until we become harmonious between the two. As women, become harmonious between the two. But if you're a woman that's rejected being gentle, being tender, being vulnerable, being the supporter. If you've rejected that, you've literally shut off your power, and it's just going to be pain. And if a man, this is me, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the military, very dominant, strong leader, always striving to succeed. That eventually led to pain for me. And I went through a long depression and things like that, 7 years. And so I rejected the masculinity and I went into my feminine. And then I attracted dominating women, and that crushed me as well. And so it is about harmony between the two energies within us and then coming together. So when you are feeling whole within yourself, that's the time to go into a relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And it's to when you're in that empowered state, like a relationship's a beautiful dynamic. When you're in a disempowered state, when you're needy, or when you're avoiding your emotions and you move into a relationship and you're attracted to someone who's going to, make you feel whole, it's just going to lead to breakdown and lessons and growth.
Oh, yes. I like, I'll bring it back to what you said before, which is everyone's reflecting what we have yet unhealed, technically, right? So they're reflecting back at you what you haven't dealt with. What are some good ways, in your opinion, that people can start to address that? Because from what I've seen in dynamics is, and I see this all the time, I think on social media, is people say that when you're triggered in any sort of relationship or dynamic, that's a bad thing and you should run. I have the opposite opinion. For me, it's, if you're triggered, you should probably sit with it and maybe see what it's bringing up for you and what you need to deal with.
Yeah. So I love relationship dynamics, and I run an event called the Empowerment Experience, and I'm going to share with you part of what I share with people at that event, which is how attraction works, right? And so we're attracted to someone that displays the missing and disowned parts of ourselves, right? So anything that we have suppressed or repressed, we're going to be attracted to someone who actually expresses those parts. And so this is genetically, but also psychologically as well. There was a study done, and I think it was called the smelly t-shirt study, something like that.
I know what you're talking about. Yes. Okay.
So for those that haven't heard about the study, essentially they got men to wear the same t-shirt for about 48 hours. And then the men took the t-shirts off. And then these t-shirts got delivered to a group of women, and the women had to smell the t-shirts and decide who was the most attractive. And in 80% of the woman, they chose someone who displayed the opposite genetics and psychological traits to them, right? Two halves make a whole. So where they were like disowning aspects of themselves, these men were expressing it, and they could smell that through the pheromones and the scent. And they actually found the 80% of people that didn't pick, you could say correctly, it's probably a bad word, they were on birth control pills. So that was messing their hormones. So that's a really cool study that displays it. But essentially, like if you suppress vulnerability within you, you're going to be attracted to a guy who expresses vulnerability. That is the reflection, the mirror, because you're seeking wholeness. You're always seeking wholeness. And the bits that you're missing, someone else has. And when you come together, that creates wholeness. And so that's how attraction works. Now, your question was around someone being the mirror, and if they trigger you, you should run. So, boom, you're going to draw these people in. That are essentially they've got the key to your lock, right? Boom, they come in, and then you're going to have two choices. One, you stay not whole, which is relatively disempowered, and you rely on this person to essentially fill those gaps. Or you see them as the reflection of where you actually are disowning aspects of yourself. Now, if you are we'll use vulnerability. That was the one you talked about. You're a woman. Those feminine traits are natural to your being.
Mm-hmm.
If suppressed and repress them, and a guy comes in who has them, you're going to start creating conflict because you're actually in the opposite energy to what's natural for you. So there's going to be conflict there. And this is the triggers that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So there's a conflict that occurs when he's not making you feel safe because he's being all vulnerable and he's not leading, he's not taking charge, and you're starting to get pissed off and triggered and like frustrated with a guy that's not sort of leading and dominating. And so you get triggered, and some of your friends say, well, that's a sign you should run. Well, if you just run, you're just going to draw it back in again because you haven't integrated that aspect of yourself. It's like, I loved what you said. Sit with it. Why is this happening? It's 1,000, a million, infinite. It is a reflection of you, right? So take responsibility and go, whereabouts am I suppressing or repressing the trait that I see in him? So if it's the trait of vulnerability, then whereabouts am I suppressing and repressing that in myself? Oh, shit. It's like, I know I'm being protective. What's the opposite to vulnerability? Being protective, being defensive. Oh my God, I am. Okay, now let's explore why I'm shutting down vulnerability. Okay, let's heal that wound. And there's many ways to heal a wound.
Yeah.
Balance that perception. You're going to feel yourself soften. You're going to be okay being vulnerable. Now, that guy's probably not going to be the right guy for you, right? Because you've healed it. He came in literally to show you where you need to heal. When it heals truly, you're going to be like, oh, I don't want this guy. And that's the magnetism of it. Then you're going to bring in a guy who is going to have the strength so that you can be vulnerable, right? So that's how attraction works. And yeah, the last relationship I went through, it destroyed me. Flat out destroyed me. She was a masculine woman. I saw some things in her which I perceived were going to support me in living my best life, right? That's how attraction works. Boom. So I was like, oh, yeah, let's scoop her up. Now, there were other aspects of her that were unhealed, and part of it was this whole softening masculinity. She was very controlling, very independent. Now, the masculine pole seeks space. The feminine pole seeks closeness. Because she was really dominating in her masculine, when there was conflict, she ran. And as I was in the feminine pole, I chased, right? So if you know attachment styles, this is avoidance. I was attacked, like anxious attached. Yeah. So that dynamic played out, and it broke me. It broke me down to my knees, and months and months and months of crying, of nightmares, of just horrible experience. And all of it was just a reflection. And I knew that. So I had to work through it. I was like, what is she displaying that I'm not sort of displaying in my life? And it took me months I've got a process called a depolarization process. And I was just taking myself through that with every single aspect of her that I admired or looked up to or was attached to or infatuated with, every single trait. And there was about 12 of them. I went and I owned all of them in my life and went, whereabouts am I suppressing or repressing this within myself? Even one of them was beauty. Like, she was so beautiful. And I was like, whereabouts am I not seeing my own beauty or my own handsomeness? And I was like, fuck, I'm actually a good looking guy. Like, I don't need to outsource that. Another one was depth. So I was just so attracted to her depth. And I was like, well, whereabouts am I not displaying it? I went through the depolarization process and I started to own my own depth and wisdom. So by going through that, I no longer had an attachment to this woman, right? So I neutralized all of the things that I was attached to her for, neutralized all of that, done. Now my next relationships are going to play out very differently because I'm not going to attract in someone with those traits. Does that make sense?
Oh, perfect sense. And I had like 3 epiphanies as you were talking about that, because I was reminiscing about my previous dynamics and relationships as well. And then also looking at the current types of men that I'm now attracted to. I'm no longer, like, if I see a man that is in his feminine, I'm very repelled by it. Like I'm almost annoyed. I'm just like, I don't have time for this. I don't want to mother you. That's not my job. But then but then you brought in the great point of attachment types, and that kind of sparked my brain a little bit and made me think, hang on. So this is interesting. I talked about this actually the other day. Attachment types are always case by case depending on the person, is what I discovered. You don't always have the same one all the time. It kind of depends who you're with. And with myself, and I think some people are pretty stuck in their attachment types. But for me, if I'm with a secure partner, I am secure. If I'm with an avoidant, I'm anxious. If I'm with an anxious, I'm avoidant. But then the way you described the masculine and the feminine, I'm now curious in so many dynamics if that truly might be the case as well as the attachment type. I don't know.
They're the same thing.
Yeah.
So masculine is the avoidant,
Mm-hmm.
feminine is the attachment. When someone has integrated their masculine and feminine, they become secure.
Mm.
So they're the same thing.
Yeah, I never in a million years thought about that, and now that makes more sense. I'll be honest. It makes a lot more sense. There were so many times where I had dated men who appeared to be in their masculine, and then they'd switch and be in their feminine, which was kind of off-putting. So I don't know how that happens or why, but I've noticed that for myself. I think my most toxic relationship that kind of destroyed me as well, and like launched me into focusing on my career, is I didn't feel safe in my feminine with him. I didn't feel reassured. At the beginning I did, and then it stopped. And I'm sure there's many different reasons for that. And right when it ended, I was in a very deep masculine energy, to the point where any man that after I had tried to heal from that dynamic, any man that I dated afterwards, very much in their feminine energy, meaning, I don't know, it was like very chasey, very overly vulnerable, too charming and overtly emotional, where it would just put me off. So it's interesting.
You were saying that you experienced this oscillation within your relationship, like 1 minute he was masculine, 1 minute he was feminine.
Yeah.
That is going to happen, but the degree in which it happens, the more. So even with someone who's secure, you're still going to notice that sometimes they are in the masculine pole, sometimes they're in the feminine pole, right? Sometimes they're sometimes in the negative. And that oscillation will always be occurring. You'll notice it in a relationship. Sometimes one person's up, one person's down. Sometimes one person's down, one person's up. That's a healthy balance.
Okay.
However, if it goes to the extremes, so it's like he becomes extremely feminine and emotional and crying and feels not good enough. It's like, as that person's partner, you've got a choice. It's like, you can be there and be there to support him back into his power, right? And cool, you can do that. Or you can say, look, this is too extreme for me. I'm out. And there's no right or wrong. When you're feeling down, how nice would it be to have a man that supports you? When he's feeling down, how nice would it be for you to support him? The problem comes is when the majority of the time you feel like you're being a coach or a parent to a boy, as opposed to, there are men. Vulnerability in a man is a very powerful, beautiful, amazing thing.
Yep.
It's just when it's overcooked and it's their go-to thing, because vulnerability is essentially a victim. If you're vulnerable, you're a victim. You're needing someone else to sort of come in and support you. And as a man, that's what we love. We love supporting women. Like, that is what we're on this earth to do, is provide that role. Obviously, when it's flipped and there's a man who's too vulnerable and emotional, it's just going to be gross, right? So the degree to which someone goes into their masculine and feminine is going to dictate, and the timing of it. If it's just an emotional reaction or a trigger, you're probably going to be like, oh, fuck, this dude is just wasting my time. But if it's a man and he's worked his ass off for you and he's been there and he's supporting you, and maybe has one of his parents die or a good friend dies and he drops to his knees with like grief, it's like, you're not going to run away in those moments, right? You're going to be there and support him and hold him, right, whilst he processes. So I just wanted to mention that because a lot of the time a man could be vulnerable and the woman runs, where I'm like, well, actually, if you can hold him in that just for a period of time and encourage him, because the feminine is the supporter. And it's like, you know, babe, I believe in you. I love you. You can fucking do this, you know? And that's actually going to help him get back into his power. Whereas if you run, he'll because he's in the negative pole already, he's down on his knees, he'll probably chase. And that's when the dynamic gets really gross. But if you soften into your feminine, you're actually going to put him back into his masculine power. So just be mindful. There's no right or wrong way. You can soften further. It's actually gonna, you know, if you were frustrated or pissed off with something,
yes,
and then there was a young child that was lost in a supermarket, you're instantly going to forget about all your problems and go and help this child, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Cool. So it's a similar dynamic. It's like, instead of running and going, oh, this is a problem, it's like, how about leaning into that person and saying, well, how can I get this man back in his power? You know, if it becomes chronic and he's not learning his lessons, and overall it's like, this is too much, nothing's going to be perfect. No man is going to be perfect. There are going to be times when he is an asshole, when he's right in his masculine and he's like, shut up, we're doing it my way, right? And maybe he's had a bad day and he's like, ugh. And there are going to be times maybe when he's on his knees in pain. And so I feel that to love someone unconditionally, which means when they're doing both. But one of the girls I dated recently was, you know, she was in both poles, sometimes here, sometimes here. And I just loved her in both, because it's like, that pattern isn't you. That pattern is a wound or a trigger. And it's like, I'm not going to run away because of that. I'm going to be there to support you back into your feminine. Or if you go too feminine, too much of a victim, too, you know, emotional, it's like, if you go, babe, let's go, we've got to keep moving forward. You know, the voice of empowered masculinity is, we can do this. The voice of empowered feminine, the empowered masculinity, I should say, is like, we're going forward towards success. Empowered femininity is the supporting and the pushing behind. So one's the pull of the masculinity, one is the push of the femininity. And so sometimes you're going to need a man to be like, get back on your feet, let's go. Sometimes you're going to need a man to be like, it's okay, I've got you. We don't need to do anything. I'm just here to listen to you, to hear you out. And so it is a dance. It is a dance, and sometimes it'll be extreme, sometimes it'll be subtle. I feel, and you may agree or disagree, that to love someone is to love them in both sides. And I feel, and I teach, is that the couple must have a vision which is greater than their individual selves.
Yeah.
And so that gives the entity, the relationship, something to work towards, where these little emotional triggers, downfalls, it's kind of irrelevant, because you're just supporting each other to get back on track, back towards your vision. And that could be for a family, to raise some kids. It could be to build a massive business or an empire. It could be to go and do charitable work overseas. If that vision is bigger than your own individual needs, these little fluctuations are, they're going to be quite irrelevant. They're going to be just little hiccups along the way to the greater vision.
Yeah, I honestly wish more people knew that, not to run in conflict in any dynamic or relationship. I think a lot of people like to run. They see any sort of issue and like maybe they address it for a little bit, but eventually a lot of people don't really. It's almost like male and female against each other as opposed to a team, right? It should always be you and your partner against the issue as opposed to each other. And I find a lot of the times and a lot of dynamics that I see with friends, family, what have you, that it's always them kind of butting heads instead of trying to take a step back and look at the overall mission or goal or factor of what's really going on and address it that way. So I love that you said that. And then as well as making that reference to, if a child is hurt and upset, are you going to abandon it? No, right? You're going to encourage them to, did I say it? I did. I called child an it. Yes, I did. But if you see if you see a child, right, that's helpless, because we all have our inner children that need to be nurtured and cared for. So for me personally, anytime I see anyone in like any sort of hurt emotionally, I take a step back and just see them as their wounded inner child and try to support them that way. However, in my past, I've dated mostly feminine men up until recently, so that's nice. But yeah, it's I just loved the way you explained it. It was just so clear and very concise. Like I can't, I don't really have questions about what you've said, except for I agree with you in all honesty. One of the main questions though that I did have, I'll jump back to it and then we can jump back, is about your depression and what you went through and all of that. Was your relationship like that you had been through related to that depression, were there separate occurrences, and how did you make it through that? What were ways that you overcame that?
In 2014, I was, it's like I had it all, right? I was competing at a very high level in sport. I owned real estate. I owned these two gyms. I just sold them and I had cash in the bank. And I was very inspired and inspiring to others. And I had a lot of following in Australia and New Zealand. And I moved into a relationship and she was a world champion fitness model. Now, behind the scenes, she was a wreck. Depression, anxiety, going through divorce, 2 children. She lost custody of the kids. It was just a lot. And so, I came in and didn't think I could rescue her because I didn't know about a lot of it until we got deeper into the relationship. But it turned into a case of me doing absolutely everything. Like I just had this broken woman. And like I said, I was like, I'm just going to stick through this. I'm not just going to run. And I just started my spiritual path and learned about what empathy was. I was like, oh, this is crazy. Compassion? What's that? So I was just really having empathy and compassion for this girl, but it was burying me, And so over the 3-year relationship, my mental health got so destroyed. For anyone that comes to my events, I've never shown it publicly, but I share photos of messages I had sent people when I was in this depressed state. And that was sort of 2016 when it was 2 years in, I was just broken. So I ended up in hospital, very, very sick. I was dying, in and out of hospital, and the doctors didn't know what was going on. And really, it was just the toxicity of this relationship was killing me. I lost myself. I lost all my money, gone, had to sell my house to just be able to afford to keep living. And I lost my self-worth. It all just destroyed. And so I did what I had always done. It was like, well, the more successful I was, the more validated I became. So that's when I went and did a Guinness World Record. I was like, I'll get myself back by doing this Guinness World Record. So I did that, and I still felt empty and broken and lost and confused. And I was like, fuck, I can't shake this. And I just tried to be more successful. I grew a coaching business and I started making all this money and traveling the world and running events. And I was still feeling this emptiness inside me, this unworthiness. It was massive amounts of shame and unworthiness. And so I didn't know what to do apart from keep trying. So I went into some relationships and, fantastic. I'm still friends with all of my exes. Some were great. Some broke down really quickly. That's cool. But it got to a point where I was like, something is fundamentally wrong. Like, this is not a normal way to be living. And I'd never said I was depressed. Well, I had, but I'd never admitted it to the world. And yeah, then COVID hit. I lost a lot of money through COVID. I won't go into the details, but that smashed me, my business. Again, my self-worth plummeted. And I moved into a relationship. And because my self-worth was low, don't take this the wrong way, but that's the feminine pole. That's the negative pole. Not good enough is the feminine pole. Good enough is the masculine pole. You actually want to be in the middle of the two, but we won't go into the semantics. So I was like way down in the negative pole, but I had this mask on of success. I dated a girl and she's like, oh my God, you're John Templeton. You're so amazing and all this. And when she got to know me, it was like, I was broken. Behind the scenes, I was broken. And so this other girl came in and she, same thing, like, wow, you're John Templeton. And then she got to know me and she's like, she ran, right? She didn't feel safe with me. And I don't blame her at all. I was a mess. And this is a 7-year journey. And during those 7 years, I'll talk now about like coming out of it. Well, the last relationship is the one that really got me to look in the mirror and go, like, where am I hiding all my shame, my unworthiness? Where are my insecurities lying? Like, let's actually face these, because they were the deepest, darkest wounds I had of not being worthy or good enough. And, if anyone's ever experienced it, you want to kill yourself. And I wanted to kill myself because I just felt so much shame and unworthiness. So I seeked a lot of help, and I was lucky that I had money. I could just use different healers or coaches, but nothing worked. Because none of them had really experienced the depth of darkness. They were all coaches and certified. None of them knew what I was going through. So none of them could help me. That's why I'm very grateful for this experience, because I know what it's like, right? It's a mess. And so if anybody's felt depression, you'll know what I'm talking about. You don't see a way out. And so there's no point in being alive, because all you feel is heavy, black, dark, unworthy, not good enough to even get out of bed. And what the fuck is the point of living when you're in that state or condition? And so that's where I was. And then it forced me, I've got a chair in my bedroom, and there were lots of tears. I used like Tantra and emotional release, somatic release. I saw all these different healers, Reiki, the spiritual path, not psychologists, but people that were more psychology. And it was just nothing. So I just sat in my chair in my room one day for 4 hours, and because I was feeling anxiety about life and things, and I just sat there and I had the most liberating experience ever. About 3 hours or so in, my mind switched off and it just went completely silent. And Wayne Dyer has a quote, which is, the only thing that can't be divided is silence. And I remember in that moment, that sort of, it wasn't a thought, but that was the realization that was there. It was like, wow, this is the first time in my life where I've ever heard the sound of silence. And it was the most peaceful, beautiful, abundant state that, like, I felt like I was one with the universe, one with God, one with the divine. And it lasted for about an hour. And then I kind of like came back to reality and was like, what the hell just happened? And so that kind of gave me a safe space to come to. I knew that was inside of me. And so I could always come back to that. Even on the darkest days, I could always kind of come back to that. So I say to people, getting out of depression was a fucking battle. I'm talking minute by minute sometimes, like dark thoughts in my head. And I had these big dreams and visions, and it was like, I couldn't even imagine them anymore. It was like, that's not possible. So I was like, well, what is possible? It's like, well, what would make me happy now? Like in this moment, forget the future, forget everything. Like right now, what would make me happy? And it was things like going to the gym. So I was like, I'll go to the gym. So I would do that for an hour. Then afterwards, maybe I'd start to have dark thoughts again. I was like, okay, what would make me happy? In this moment, it's like, okay, go to the beach. So my income went down to like $500 a month. And I was living in this big sort of mansion, paying a stupid amount of money for the upkeep of it. I just got to this point where my happiness came above anything else. And so it was like, I don't care if I lose all my money. I don't care if I lose all my friends. I don't care. As long as in this moment I can choose peace and happiness, that's what I'm going to focus on. And obviously from that place of peace and happiness and abundance, that's true abundance, right? This is when I figured out that money doesn't make you abundant. Abundance makes you money, really.
Yep.
So I just kept coming back to that place inside myself of like my joy, my happiness, my abundance. And from that place, it's like the whole world transformed. Instead of, all these expectations of what should be happening, it was like, I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to be happy. and I'm just going to keep coming back to this feeling of empowerment inside myself. And from there, I started to get my self-belief back. I started to just no longer be controlled by the outside world. No more external validation, no more money and self-worth, no more of those things. All internally, I am good enough as I am, with no money, with no friends, with nothing. Bam. And that just gave me a foundation. It just gave me a foundation. And I just said, I'm not even going to think about the future. I'm just going to keep coming to this place here. And from there, it was like inspiration started to flow again, and life started to return. And I started to see the magnificence of life without having to be someone, without having to have lots of money, just the magnificence of being alive. And I think, and I know that that is where I want to build the rest of my life from. My relationships, my business, my career is from not external validation, from 100% just being inspired by life itself and following that pathway wherever that flows.
I think the whole basis of this conversation just kind of like tied together very well with what you said of it all just it essentially comes down to you and your self-worth. And also, I mean, the fact that you climbed out of that hole on your own because you chose to is what does that, right? I think when we're in a dark place, we have the choice of whether or not we want to come out. And a lot of people don't understand that and don't believe that, but it's true. You have that moment where you have a choice to go, okay, either I can sit here and continue to feel this way and be in this spot, or I can have a moment of clarity that you had, right? You just sat with everything and allowed it to just happen. And then you had that clarity, which is just beautiful. So I think it's very admirable, that story too, of how you overcame that, because not a lot of people have the strength to do that. So yeah.
I think as well, it's important, like I had the tools and resources from being a coach, and just I knew the dynamics of what was happening. I just struggled. You know, when you're emotional, it's very, very hard to have clarity.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say for people, it's like, if you are experiencing that, you know, get help. I would get help, but just make sure the person has been through it and has the tools, because a lot of psychologists have the tools, but they haven't been through it.
No.
And so very,
and then
very
you're talking
hard.
to like a robot, essentially, right? You don't feel connected to them, and then it's tough to go, okay, well, I don't really feel like you get me, so what's the point, you know? So
yeah, seek help. Seek help. And if the first person's not the person, just keep going. Just keep going. You know, you've never tried it all. People have, you know, say I've tried everything. It's like, that's a lie. You have not tried everything. Because if you had tried everything, you'd no longer be depressed. It is a temporary experience that we're going through. It's not who we are. You know, someone said, a lot of people, because I came out publicly and I just said, I've been depressed for a long time, and everyone's like, oh, this is going to ruin your business. It did the opposite. My business picked up because everyone was like, fuck, this dude understands. And a lot of people, said, well, you've got it now. You've got it for life. You can't get rid of it. And I was just like, well, I definitely don't believe that to be true.
Yeah.
It's just a feeling we feel. And it's there based on the thoughts we have, the expectations we have, you know, on past experiences, and that can all be cleaned up. So I went through the process myself of cleaning it all up. Clean all of my expectations up around wealth, around being loved, all of these things. And as soon as I let go of all of those attachments and expectations, that's what really freed me. I had two core fears that I worked through. One core fear was that if I didn't have much money, I'd be unworthy. And yeah, if I ran out of money, what would people think? Would I still appear in their eyes as, you know, a good coach or someone that they would want to be in a relationship with? So I had to work through the fear of running out of money. That one was a game changer. A lot of men as well tie their worth to their status and the financial aspect. Work through that, and I reckon most men will clear themselves out of depression. And the other one was around my spirituality, because a lot of people sort of reject the spiritual side of life. People kind of sit on two sides. They're either like atheist or spiritual, and it's kind of I'm I don't become attached to either. And I was really scared to put out that spiritual aspect of me, like who will people think, who will reject me, who will love me. And so I worked through that fear as well. And that just allowed me to be my authentic self. It's like, well, this is who I am. When you are being your authentic self, all the magic happens from that place. Everything. So I built an online course called Discover Your Authentic Self after this experience. It's completely free. If you want to go and do it, it's ruthlessauthenticity.com. Go and have a look at that. In fact, even for yourself, go through it. And just because you'll just be like, when we were talking about attachment styles and things like that, there's a few slides in the presentation where you'll be like, this all makes sense now. So yeah, just wanted to say that. And so those two core fears were huge in me just letting all of this pressure off so I could just be myself.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, it's authenticity is what drives us, right? A lot of people wear a mask. A lot of people try to be someone that they're not in order to get validation. Or, I mean, it could stem from like a core belief as well, and like their childhood and a belief that who they actually are is not good enough. And then, so that's the whole thing. But yeah, authenticity is what essentially connects you to your purpose and yourself and what should be your driving force, right? And your purpose in life. Because without that, it's very tough to live a meaningful life that's fulfilling in any way. So the last question that I have that I ask people at the end of every episode is, if anyone has resonated with your story or anything that you've talked about, what would be the advice that you give them? What would you say to them?
Say hi. Say that this provided some value for you. That's why I do it. I used to do it for validation for all of those things, and now I do it because I feel great and I want other people to. When I say I feel great, I have my good days and bad days, but there's a general sense of I'm good. I want to support others, and so reach out. Say if something's landed and it's supported you, that lights me up. Just hearing that. So that's what I would say. Reach out to me. If you want to learn more, go through the Discover Your Authentic Self course. If you're on social media, it's at John Templeton Official. I got a website as well if you want to check that out, johntempletonofficial.com. But just connect with me. I've got so much free stuff, resources, relationship, e-guide. It's all there. So just connect with me and say hi. And yeah, that makes me happy.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was very lovely to talk to you. It was a very informative conversation. I learned a lot. I feel like I had like 12 epiphanies about my own life during this. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. And remember, you have to go through the eye of the storm to see the clear horizon ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next week.